Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome, and we are happy to have you. Most of you do not know that Brittany Barnes Boutique used to be BB's Blankets and Crafts. I used to make custom blankets of all sizes along with accessories for babies. I made my first one late 2018 for my daughter. Everyone loved it, so it very quickly turned into a small sort of side hustle, and I started selling to locals, friends, family, and even some small boutiques. I started making tumblers in 2020, so when COVID hit and it was really hard to get fabric at the store, I was making way too many trips, so I fell back onto tumblers and just faded out making the blankets. But every now and then I break out the sewing machine and make one for a gift. And the first thing that I do is run to Hobby Lobby and pick out my fabric. So what I'm looking for is 100% cotton patterned fabric, and they have a huge section. It's always 30% off. My friend is having a little baby boy, so we grabbed this really cute boho mountain print, and then I headed over to the polyester backings, and we're going to pick a soft back. Now there are tons of options for the polyester backing, however some are extremely difficult to work with. This one in particular, or the rosette pattern, is very hard to work with, but if you are a beginner, this that is more solid, or the dot minky, is a wonderful option to pick and great for beginners. This indigo minky had a really cool texture to it, so I grabbed it to go with our boho mountains and headed over to get it cut. For a child size blanket, I got 1.5 yards of the cotton and 1 yard of the minky polyester. Now next we needed to pick a thread to match our blanket. I just grabbed a all-purpose thread and we were ready to go. So since these are 100% cotton and our backing is 100% polyester, the very first thing I'm going to do is pre-shrink this cotton fabric. I'm just going to put it on a rinse and spin cycle and then throw it in the dryer so that we can pre-shrink this fabric. And once the customer or whoever you are gifting this to washes it, it doesn't shrink, and then the blanket will just get all wonky. So make sure that you do pre-shrink your fabric and you do not use any sort of laundry detergents or fabric softeners, because infants and children can be allergic to those things and we don't want to cause any sort of reaction. We are cutting this to child size, so I am doing 36 inches by 54 inches. This will make roughly a 34 by 52 inch blanket. This board that I'm cutting on I got from Walmart, but you can also get those from craft stores and Amazon. And full disclosure, y'all, a rule of thumb to go by whenever you are working with fabrics is your fabric scissors are your fabric scissors. You don't use them to cut anything else. No paper, no other craft items. They are for fabric because you need extra sharp scissors to get through this. It's been a very long time since I made anything to do with fabric, so I have broken that rule. My scissors were awful, so I ran up to my closest store so I could get these complete, and all they had was kitchen scissors. So we had to work with it, okay? It still got the job done, and that's what we wanted. So the first thing that I do after I grab these out of the dryer is put them down on my measuring board. And then I cut off the little slither that has the brand and the coating on it for the fabric print. I cut that off because that will be our straight edge that I put up against the numbers on my board. And then I take an iron on the cotton setting and just iron it out really flat to make sure that there's no wrinkles in it. We want this as flat as possible so that we get the most accurate cut. Once we have our printed fabric cut, I'm going to show you a little trick on how I like to cut the back when I'm using this solid minky rather than the dot textured or the fluffy pattern is what I call it, but the rosette. So we're gonna place the Minky with the soft side facing up and our cotton pattern facing down towards that soft side. This is how we are going to sew our blanket. So I'm going to line these up together, and then I will take my iron and go over them to make sure that it is nice and flat. And then I will go around and trim off the excess Minky that is hanging over from the 3 sides. If you are lucky and have a good person cutting your fabric, then you will have one good straight side you can line your cotton up with. Otherwise, just center that cotton up and trim all of the excess off of the 4 sides. I also grabbed a box of pins from Hobby Lobby, and we're going to go around the border of this fabric with pins. Now on the 4 corners, this is how I've always done it. I go through my 4 corners first. I face the pin going to the point of the corner that holds the corner in place, and then all of my other pins are sitting about an inch back from the edge of my fabric and spaced anywhere from an inch to 2 inches apiece. Make sure you're holding your fabric steady and in place so that you do not move it around from where you have ironed it. You press the pin down through the fabric and then push it back up, and that will hold it in place. Once you have all of the borders pinned, we are going to start sewing our blanket. You want to find the bottom side of the blanket, pick a corner, and then start about 10 inches from the corner. We're sewing about 1/2 inch away from the edge of the blanket. We're going to go all the way around, and then once we get to the side that we started at, we're going to leave about a 5-inch gap so that we can flip this blanket right side out, close the gap, and then sew our border. Now when you start a section, you are going to go forward about 1/4 inch, go back and then forward again, and that is going to hold your stitching in place. Once you make it to the corner of your blanket, stop about 1/4 inch before the other side. Make sure your needle is down into the fabric, and then flip it, and then you can go the other way. Now I will have a wonderful beginner's sewing machine linked down in the description below. You can also get them at Walmart for $100. The one I'm using is ancient, and I don't think that they're even sold anymore. This is one of the 2 machines that I have had in my lifetime, and I started sewing when I was pretty young. I would say about 6 years old. So this one in particular is not sold anywhere. But the advice that I can give you when searching for a sewing machine, if you have not had one in the past, is look for a beginner's one that does not have a ton of adjustments on it. Look for something really simple. You don't need anything fancy unless you are making clothing or quilting. I mean, even a kid's sewing machine will make this blanket. It's really easy. All right, so once we have made it back to the side that we started our stitching, we're going to come around that corner and leave about 5-inch gap, just large enough for you to pop your hand in there and grab the corner of the blanket inside. And don't forget, just as you started your stitching, you're going to stop and then go back and then forward about 1/4 inch so that you can seal that stitching in and it will not come unraveled. Trim off your excess thread, and then we're going to go around the blanket and remove all of the pins. Now when we get to the corners, you're going to trim the point off the corner. This is going to help when you turn the blanket right side out. You will be able to put those corners to a point instead of them being really thick with all of that fabric inside. Now I only left about 1/4 inch of a border around the edges. If you have more than that, then you definitely want to take some really sharp scissors and go around the edge and trim that down so that it's not noticeable once we flip our blanket right side out. The only place that you want just a little more fabric, and as you can see, there's somewhere in between 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch, is the gap that we left, because we are going to sew that together once we have this flipped inside out or right side out. So we're going to want enough fabric for us to stitch that closed. You reach through that gap, grab the top left side corner of your blanket on the inside, and then pull that through until you get your blanket completely right side out. Find your corners and pull them out to a point. Once you have all of your corners to a point, we're going to lay this completely flat, and then our main focus first is going to be that gap that we left. We want to iron that so that it is even with the rest of the blanket, and then we are going to iron all of our edges nice and flat so that we can quickly sew the border around our blanket. Once we have made it all the way around, we're going to go back to our sewing machine and close that gap. Only this time we're going close to the edge as possible so that we can seal both of those fabrics together. We're going to trim off the excess thread, and then we're going to go around the entire blanket with a 1-inch border. Going around the whole blanket with a 1-inch border will help it last longer. It will keep everything in place, especially after it is washed, and will give it a very nice, clean look. Once you have met that point where you started your border, again, go back, forward, and back again. That way you can seal in that stitching and trim off all of your excess thread. Double check your blanket to make sure that you got all of those pins out and there is no strings hanging from it anywhere, and that all of your borders are sealed in with your seam. And your blanket is complete. So like I said, it is very easy to make. The most difficult part of this entire process is just getting the blanket cut, because it is time consuming. It's not difficult, it just takes a little time. It took me 2 hours to make 2 blankets, and they make incredible personal gifts that last a lifetime, or awesome items to have in your shop, especially around holidays. As I said in the beginning, I can make lots of accessories that match these blankets, anywhere from burp cloths, bibs, wristlets for mom to match, or even matching tumblers using the fabric. If that is something that you would like to see, please let me know down in the comments, and I will definitely incorporate that into my future tutorials. That is all for today. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.